Before I get started, I wanted to give whoever's listening a little bit of insight on what this podcast is about. Almost everyone has gone through a breakup of some sort, whether that be a breakup with an ex-partner or an ex-friend. Breakups are obviously devastating and hard, but they shape us into the people that we are today. My hope for this podcast is to make you realize that you aren't alone when it comes to going through a breakup. You can get through it, and hopefully learn something from it at the end of the day. This is Obliterate Podcast. I'm your host, Christine Nikolic. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, or feelings about me, my guest, or just the podcast in general, feel free to email me at obliteratepodcast@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at obliteratepodcast. My guest today is Christina. She's a podcaster and a publicist from the DC area. In this episode, Christina opens up to me about an ex-boyfriend from college who tragically passed away and explains why they didn't work out as a couple. This is Christina and the ex-boyfriend. How's it going, Christina?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. So where are you from?
I live in Richmond, Virginia.
Did you grow up there?
I grew up in like DC, so it's not too far from home.
Okay. And then what do you do for a living? I know you're also a podcaster, but what do you do for your day job?
Yeah, I host the Restricted Section podcast, and I'm also a publicist for a small press here.
Oh, that's cool. Did you go to school for publishing?
I have like an English degree, so basically.
Nice. So who are you talking about today?
I'm talking about an old boyfriend of mine.
Okay. And how did you guys meet?
We met just through mutual friends. I took a year off from college and I lived with my parents. And during that time, I reconnected with some high school friends, and he was friends with those high school friends.
Okay. Do you remember your first encounter?
Well, it's funny because he did go to the same high school as me, and we realized many years later that when we were in high school, I had met him because I had brought in decorated cupcakes for a friend's birthday, and he had asked me for one, and I was like, I don't know you. I'm not going to give you a cupcake. And then I didn't see him again for 5 years, and then I met him properly at a house party.
Okay. So I'm guessing you guys were different grades in high school?
I think he might have been a year younger because we didn't run into each other very much.
So what were some of your favorite memories together?
He just was the most fun-loving person I ever knew. So we just it's the smallest things of when we are together that are the best memories, just driving around and sitting on his mom's front porch and just drinking beers,
Oh, and how long were you guys together for?
I think it was about 2 years.
So can you kind of explain the progression of your relationship?
Definitely. So, I said I took a year off from college, but what really happened is my freshman year, I took the freedom went to my head a little bit, and I didn't get as good of grades as my parents would have hoped. So they made me come home for a year. And so I was in a little bit of a weird place. It's weird to go off to college, and having never had any freedom before. And then it's super weird to come home after that year of freedom. And then my parents are like, well, you have a curfew now and all this stuff. So, I was I was 19 and just in such a weird place. Who even knows what's going on when they're 19?
Yeah, that's so true.
So, when we were dating, he was the nicest, most fun-loving, joyful person I'd ever met. And 10 years later, now I would never make the choice to date him because his life was just kind of a wreck. But I loved it then. Because it just seemed like, yeah, capitalism and like our society is terrible. So like why participate in it? Which obviously as an adult, I know that's not really how it works. But so I think you can see like the obvious conflict in our relationship was eventually I did go back to school and I was working toward a career, and he just kind of didn't even think that like a job was a valuable thing. He just really rejected the whole thing. So it was like a series of ultimatums, until finally I broke up with him. And then just to give you the full story, when we were together, this wasn't really a thing, but after he and I broke up, he kind of got into some really bad drugs. And a couple years after we broke up, he actually passed away.
Oh, wow. That's so sad. I was thinking when you were talking about the college thing, not to backtrack, but that almost happened to me with my college experience because I did really bad the first 6 months.
Really?
Yeah, and my parents like threatened to take me out of college, and I was like so angry at them. And looking back, like I was the idiot that was not studying and not like taking it seriously, and they probably should have taken me out. I ended up like graduating and being fine, but I've never heard of someone else like having that experience. So
Yeah, it definitely just being so supervised through high school, having really, I mean, my parents were pretty strict. I wasn't allowed to have sleepovers. Like I wasn't allowed to get in cars with my friends. So when I went to college and like they couldn't do anything about it. So I did like all the things except school because I've been doing school for so many years.
for sure, I feel like that's the one, not the one bad thing, but I feel like that's a reason not to be a super strict parent because I feel like when you are, your kids inevitably will go crazy.
Yeah, totally.
Like obviously rules are fine, but
Definitely like teach your kids how to have balance so that when they do go off on their own, they already have that skill.
for sure. So how long were you guys dating before you went back to school?
I think about a year.
What was the first year like?
Yeah, it was really fun. It was really kind of like wild. We were so young and we were doing a lot of, drinking and just like standing around in parking lots, pretty classic like teenager stuff. And yeah, I've always worked a lot. So I actually had two jobs. I was like the manager of one retail store and then I worked at another one, so that I could like save money for when I did go back to school. He had a really hard time keeping a job because he didn't have a car and because he has one of those faces, and like one of those he just always kind of seemed like he was like kind of drunk or stoned even when he wasn't. He just has one of those faces. And he had a real cavalier attitude, so he had a really hard time keeping a job.
So once you went back to school, like, did you think that he was? I mean, I guess you were so young, so you probably didn't think he was the one. But were you guys like? Did you guys for sure want to stay together when you planned on going back to school?
When I moved back to school, he actually moved with me. It was about 3 hours away from where we had both grown up. And yeah, he moved with me to my school campus, and we lived it. So that was kind of the beginning of the end. Was me being like, okay, we're gonna take this leap of faith together, and like I'm gonna trust you that you're gonna uphold you're gonna be able to come up with your half of the rent, and you're gonna like take care of the house and like do the things that we need to do, to live together as adults outside of our parents' houses. And he just kind of, I just don't think that he as a person was really capable of that kind of lifestyle.
What was he doing when he would go to school? Was he not working at all, or what was his deal?
I think it was kind of the same, like working off and on, but he was mostly just at home. We had a couple of roommates and I was still working even though I was in school. I'm just that kind of person. Like I can't not have money and I can't not be doing a bunch of stuff. So I think it was probably like, all right, we're going to move and you're going to get a job. And then, okay, like you need to like go get a job. It's been like 2 weeks. Okay. It's been a month. Like I really need you to figure this out.
So you ended the relationship, correct?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And why? What was the breaking point for the end of the relationship?
The breaking point was, I think it was like Man, so long ago. I think it was like it had been several consecutive months that he had not been able to afford his half of the rent. And then um one of our friends told me that he was stealing money from me. And I I kind of realized that, I confronted him about it, and he denied it. And I kind of realized I just couldn't be sure, because of his kind of like lackadaisical attitude, and because of his, I mean, really persistent struggles with money. I was like, there's no way for me to know for sure that you didn't do this. And like, that's bad, because that means I don't trust you. And I think that means I need to go.
So, how did your friend, or why did your friend think that he was stealing from you?
I think that they had seen something or heard something. I don't even remember which friend it was. I mean, they might have really witnessed something. It might have been him going into my things and being like, "Oh, like she said I could do this," and like hoping that our roommate wouldn't raise the alarm, but he did.
So, did you kind of, even before that happened, were you kind of wanting it to end?
Yeah, definitely. I think, when you're thinking about ending a relationship, I think that you kind of get to a point where you're looking for the reason. You have all these reasons that have been building, but you look for that one reason, like, okay, this is the fight that we're going to start so that I can break up with you. So to me, and to this day I have no idea if he actually was stealing from me or not. He very well might not have been, but that was the thing I needed, to be like, okay, that we're clearly not on the same page, and like I don't feel like I can trust you, either super literally not to steal my money, or figuratively to like have my back as my partner.
So then did he move out immediately after that fight?
I moved out. I actually remember this really specifically. Like I said, my college had a lot of just really crappy houses full of crappy college students. And I had a friend who lived in shared housing, with like two or three other roommates, and they had a spare bedroom, but it was like the cat's bedroom, and like the litter box was in it, and they jokingly called it the flea room. And I
Oh
remember
my God.
I remember texting this friend being like, "Can I have the flea room?" There were no fleas, for the record.
That's good. So then did he stay in your college town?
He stayed for, I think, a good while, maybe like 4 or 6 months. I think until the lease ran out. I think I managed to get off the lease, and he was stuck with it, and he couldn't pay it. So he moved back in with his mom, and there he stayed.
Did you see him a lot, like on campus or just around at all randomly? Or did you guys not see each other at all those 6 months?
Yeah, I saw him because when he moved down, to my college to be with me, he didn't have any of his own friends, so all of his friends there were my friends. So I did see him after we broke up.
Did he try getting back together with you at all?
Yeah, he did. I think he kind of knew that there was not a lot of hope, because I'm sure he felt it too, that she doesn't see things the way I do.
Did you feel like he loved you more than you loved him most of the relationship?
I don't know. It's so hard to say because we really were such different people. I'm like the most type A person, and he obviously was a super type B person. And so we both showed love in really different ways. And so at the time, to me, I felt like I'm doing all this work, like I'm putting all of this effort into us in terms of like making money and working towards our future, whereas he was a lot more focused on like the everyday things that we would do together. So I think we both loved each other a lot. And when I broke up with him, I didn't really want to. I just knew that I had to.
Were you heartbroken when you broke up with him, or was it kind of like a sigh of relief?
It was both. It was both at the same time. It was really tragic to leave him because I knew I would never find another guy who he really could like see the world in this way. He saw that it didn't have to be that way. Like, we don't have to be a capitalist society. Like, we don't have to be killing ourselves trying to make money we don't have to be like wearing these certain clothes. We don't have to be acting a certain way. We can all just be really kind to each other and like figure it out together. That was kind of his MO. But, we do live in this society, and like I wasn't willing to give up like, quality of life and like consistent meals and stuff like that in order to like screw the man.
Yeah, I totally get that. So you said that he reached out a couple times, but did you guys talk like consistently up until his death, or?
We did not talk. We talked pretty consistently until he moved back in with his mom, and then I he actually dated one of my friends for a year or two after that, which that's like a whole nother story of how I stopped being friends with that girl, because I was like, I just told you I didn't want to break up with him, and now you're dating him. Great.
That's so strange.
It is literally so strange, but they were a really mutually toxic couple, and together they got into some really bad drugs together. And even though I was living 3 hours away and I could only really keep up with him on Facebook and stuff, I could see that he was in a really bad place. And I could tell that she wasn't making it any better. And they were just this like terrible, toxic. It was really sad to watch that happen.
Did you try reaching out to him at all? Like when you saw him spiraling, or
Yeah, we spoke occasionally over like Facebook Messenger or whatever, and I wasn't really in a position to be like, "Hey man, it looks like you're doing bad drugs because your face is pale and terrible." Like like as his ex-girlfriend, I didn't feel like I was the best person to be like, "Do you want to talk about like your problems with addiction?" So I just kind of kept up with him like through mutual friends basically, and I tried to kind of mobilize those, like, hey, like go check on him, like is like, have you seen him, does he seem okay? And then I saw him. I had gone for maybe like 4 or 5 years without seeing him in person. And then I ran into him in a club in DC so randomly. Like I think it was about a month before he passed away. And I got to like say hi and see him. And he met my new boyfriend, who I am now married to. And yeah, and then he passed away like a month later. And I was just like, I'm so glad I got to see him like that one last time.
yeah, that's crazy that you randomly saw him right before then.
Yeah, it was super weird.
Do you remember what you guys talked about? Because I was going to ask what your last conversation was.
He was I mean, it was okay, full disclosure, it was at a club, so I was probably a little bit drunk. I think we were seeing like a DJ. But I think that he was also probably a little messed up, and so I don't think it was a very revolutionary or maybe even coherent conversation. I think that I was with my friends having a good night, and he was doing whatever he was doing there. So I think it was pretty brief.
And you said he died. Did he die of an overdose?
Yeah. Yeah, he did.
And how did you find out that he died?
Through mutual friends. I got like I was watching TV or something, like just, doing something where I wasn't looking at my phone at all. And then when I picked up my phone, I had like 10 text messages and like 6 missed calls, just like, Christina, oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? And I was like, oh my God, like what is happening? So, and then I got on Facebook, and someone had put it up there.
What did that feel like, knowing that he passed away?
It was truly one of the most tragic feelings, because it wasn't until he died that I realized that I had been watching him die from a distance for years, I feel like we all saw this coming, and like none of us could do anything to stop him.
I mean, I have family members that are drug addicts, and there's nothing you can do. It's so sad, because you can't really help someone unless they want to be helped, or unless they want to help themselves. And especially since you were his ex-girlfriend, I understand where you're coming from, where you probably didn't feel like it was your place to say anything, which I understand. Did you go to the funeral?
I did go to the funeral. There was there was like a big memorial service at like a cafe, like a like cafe where they do music and stuff that he had been to a lot. And then like a week or two later, there was like a proper family funeral, and I went to both.
What was that like, seeing his family and friends?
Oh my God. It was really bad. There was a lot of guilt involved because I don't know how to say this without it sounding so terrible, but like I was definitely the most straight edge and put together person he ever dated. And so, for example, his mom was like, he should have stayed with you. And I was like, are you like implying, that I could have like saved his life or something? So I definitely came away from that with a lot of guilt. But a lot of his friends were there too. And it was ultimately a really beautiful celebration of a very short and beautiful life.
Was he still with your friend when he died?
No, they had broken up too. And so she and I made up and reconnected at his funeral. Because, it's easy to put a beef in the past if, it's not really an issue anymore.
How often do you think about this?
I definitely think about him whenever I hear about young people getting into opiates. Like I like his life flashes before my eyes, and I'm like, oh my God, like you're gonna end up like him. It's definitely a bit of a cautionary tale in my life. I'm not the kind of person who would have ever gone down that path. As I've mentioned, I'm very type A, and but it definitely, yeah, I think of him when I see other people in similar situations having a hard time, and I just, try to just say a little prayer to the gods that this person finds the right path again.
I always think about like if like one of my exes died, like I don't know, it's such a strange thing.
It is really weird. It was a weird feeling. When I got the news, I started crying right away. And it was a very surreal feeling to be sobbing into my then boyfriend's lap about this other man.
Well, it's like that person at one point was such like a big part of your life, and like you knew them in such a different way than like friends and stuff like that. So it's just weird to think about if you would have stayed with him, like how you would have felt and all that. I feel like you just probably would have so many different scenarios go through your head finding out something like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how does it feel knowing that you won't see him again?
It's kind of a tragedy because I keep saying that. Obviously he passed away, and that's a huge tragedy. But I think it's important to note that it's a tragedy in all these small ways. His death is one great tragedy, but there's a tragedy that he's never going to smile at anyone ever again. And it's a tragedy that he'll never be a good friend again, and like all these small things that are missing from a lot of different people's lives because he's gone.
Do you have any advice for people who are in a similar situation?
Oh my gosh. As we mentioned earlier, it's really hard to help someone who is so deep down their own hole, but I think that I feel like I really did the right thing. I left a situation that was bad for me. And even though my feelings since his passing have been really complicated, I've never regretted breaking up with him. I've never second guessed that decision because I know that if I had stayed with him, either I would have gone down that path with him or we'd both be really unhappy right now. So I think just like knowing what's right for you, knowing you can really love someone, but like still not be good with them, and just being confident in your decisions, taking care of yourself.
I like that advice, being confident in your decisions.
Yeah, nobody knows what's right for you more than you do.
That's so true. What did you learn from this relationship?
I learned from him really specifically to appreciate all the tiny things in life. There's the opportunity to have fun in everything you do, and we're all in this together. This being the world and society and all of these weird places we find ourselves in. We're all in it together, and so we should be there for each other. He was the like one of the truest friends, to all of his friends. And I think that that's one of like the lessons that I took from him, is that like everything can be beautiful, and like friendship is the most important thing.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh.
Yeah, he was a really great guy. It's like it's a really sad story.
Did his personality change? Like, did you notice it changing when he was on drugs?
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird because it was kind of like out of a movie. Like, you know how in a movie when they're like, we really want you to know that this guy has done a bunch of bad drugs, and like that's kind of what he was like. Like that's based on real life. Like it's just that the sparkle kind of went out of him.
Oh man. How do you think this relationship shaped you?
I think for one thing, and you know, I feel this way about all my past relationships. Obviously, I'm married now, so I think that every relationship I had before my husband kind of helped to inform me about what I valued and what I didn't value, and as I kind of mentioned earlier, like what I value in a friend versus what I value in like a life partner. And it's helped me to just know that even if I had a super hot, super friendly, fun guy. And like, I loved that about him. I loved everything about him, but he didn't have the things I was looking for ultimately in a partner. And so now I just, I don't take as much BS in relationships. I've learned what I want.
I feel like that's such a common theme in all of the interviews I've done is people are finally learning that they need to go after what they want instead of what the person they're with wants.
Yeah, you definitely have to know when to walk away from something. And even if you love it, if it's not good for you, get out.
As someone that's married, do you have any advice for people on how to figure out if the person you're with is the one?
Oh my gosh. So full disclosure, I got married 4 days ago.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. So I don't have a whole ton of experience about married life.
You have 4 days worth, so
Yeah.
it's more than me.
Wow, so much has happened in these past 4 days. But mainly I'm really confident now in like just knowing what I want. My husband is, I mean, he's obviously we're all 10 years older, than I was when I started dating this other guy. But my husband he's like loyal and he's steady and he's so employed, and he is really able to have fun and go to work and take care of business. He can switch back and forth at the appropriate time, which I think is something that comes with adulthood. But my old boyfriend, I think just simply was not on the same path to learning those things. There's some quote, was it the Dalai Lama? Maybe somebody else said it, but they said, when you meet the love of your life, you're not supposed to get butterflies, right, in your stomach. You're supposed to feel an overwhelming peace. And so that's kind of what my husband is for me. Whereas this old boyfriend was fun and exciting and like butterflies and like crazy times. But my husband is the peace that I feel inside me.
That's so interesting. I haven't heard that quote before. I like that a lot. What are you looking forward to in the next like 6 months to a year? And what's your life like now in general?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're in a plague, so my life is pretty weird like everybody else's. I'm lucky to be able to be working from home. I'm just looking forward to my New Year's resolution this year was to be more creative, which is why I started my podcast. And that's why I've gotten into some other just like macrame and stuff. So I'm excited to just do some more exploring with myself and find some more like things I like to do.
Well, that's great. Look at you achieving your New Year's resolution. I think most people don't. That's awesome.
I think it's literally the first time that's ever happened to me.
That's great, though.
Thank you so much.
Were you and your husband planning on getting married 4 days ago? Did you guys just elope?
We got engaged on Christmas Eve, and so there was like about a month before coronavirus really hit between when we got engaged. And when coronavirus hit. And so we both have really big families. We're both children of divorced parents who all of them have remarried. So we have like 8 parents Okay, and that's like 16 grandparents. It's like so
Oh,
it's
jeez.
it's so stupid. And my husband's an only child and I'm my mom's only daughter. So we were like, oh my God, we're really gonna have like this big ass wedding. Like I don't think there's any getting around it. And that's not our style at all. And we just really felt trapped, trapped into having this big wedding. And then coronavirus hit, which is obviously a terrible tragedy and a lot of people are dying. But we were like, hey, I think we can get away with not having that wedding now. Like I think we got married in the park next to our house with like 20 people.
Oh, that sounds really nice.
It was so nice, and then we like rented out like a brewery to go to afterwards, and it was just like literally the most chill, awesome thing.
Did it feel weird getting married like with 20 people during this time, or did you like have people get checked?
It was weird. We had a couple of family members who were really really nervous, and like I think there's like a balance, just like everything else. It's like you obviously don't want to be like going to bars and like sitting, drinking other people's drinks and like being crazy. But you also don't want to just be sitting at home for months and months and months, just like wasting your life away. So to me, I was kind of like, yeah, this feels right. But there was definitely some family members who didn't feel as secure. But we did it out, like I said, outside in a place that had like a lot of room for people to like sit picnic style really far apart. So we managed to keep it COVID kosher.
That's awesome. I do agree that there is a balance. Well, thanks so much for joining me. This was great. I'm excited to listen to your podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was, I haven't really talked about this particular ex in a while, and so it feels good to kind of, keep his memory alive and keep him in my personal conversation.
Good, I'm glad. I think the main takeaway I'd like everyone to have from this episode with Christina is you have to know when to walk away from something. Sometimes you meet someone who is a really great person and you have fun with them. But if the decisions that person is making don't align with what you want, as painful as it may be, walking away from that relationship could be the best thing for you. I'd also like to mention that Christina also has a podcast, and here's what she has to say about it.
So I am the host of the Restricted Section podcast, which is a Harry Potter book club podcast. I just want to make sure everyone who's listening knows that we do not condone J.K. Rowling's recent transphobic tweets. We address it on the podcast. Real awkward time to be running a Harry Potter podcast, but it is a book club podcast for adults only. It is definitely rated R. And you can follow me on Instagram at YaGirlOfTheWorld. That's YA Girl of the World, or on Twitter at Tina Fontina, like the cheese Fontina.
Obliterate Podcast is produced by me, Christina Glitch. Special thanks to Diala for providing the theme music. Please follow Obliterate Podcast on Instagram. And if you have any questions, feedback, or are interested in being a future guest, feel free to email me at obliteratepodcast@gmail.com. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share this podcast with your friends and family. And thanks so much for listening. My name's Christine Nikolic, and this is Obliterate Podcast.